I'm a 28-year-old woman, and this story has been building up for my entire life, but I only recently realized just how deep it goes. For context, I've always been the black sheep of my family, while my older sister Jessica 30F has been the golden child since day one. Jessica could do no wrong. Growing up, I remember sitting through endless praise sessions where my mom 54F would gush about Jessica's achievements while completely ignoring anything I did. Even if I had something great to share, it was always overshadowed by whatever Jessica had done that week. Looking back, the signs were there early on, but it's amazing how blind you can be when it's your own family. During high school, I worked part-time jobs to save up for college. Meanwhile, Jessica had everything handed to her. My mom even set up a separate savings account for Jessica's future, but when I asked about doing the same for me, she would brush it off and tell me I should learn to be more independent. At the time, I just thought she was being strict or trying to teach me responsibility. I had no idea what was actually going on behind the scenes. After high school, I struggled a lot financially. I had to take out student loans for college because, unlike Jessica, I didn't have any help from my parents. My mom claimed they couldn't afford it after paying for Jessica's grad school and helping her with a down payment on her first house. I remember the pit in my stomach when I found out about the down payment. It was like a punch to the gut. My sister got everything handed to her on a silver platter, while I was barely scraping by, working part-time jobs to cover rent and tuition. It wasn't until I got a well-paying job a couple of years ago that things started to turn around for me. I'd worked my ass off, saving aggressively because I was determined to buy my own place and get out of the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. That's when I noticed a shift in my mom's behavior. She suddenly became very interested in my life. She started asking a lot of questions about my job, how much I was making, and what my savings looked like. At first, I thought she was just being supportive for once, but in hindsight, it was clear she had an agenda. A few months after I got the job, my mom suggested that I move back home temporarily to save money. I was hesitant because I hadn't lived at home in years, and I valued my independence. But she insisted, saying it was out of love, and she wanted to help me get ahead. She made it sound like it would be the smart financial move. I reluctantly agreed, thinking it would only be for a short while, and it might actually help me save faster. As soon as I moved back in, things got weird. My mom started making passive-aggressive comments about my spending. If I bought takeout or treated myself to something small, she'd make remarks like, "You should be saving that money for your future," or, "I hope you're not wasting all your hard-earned money." It was annoying, but I tried to ignore it, figuring she was just being overly cautious. Then Jessica started showing up at the house more often. It was strange because she usually kept her distance, but now it felt like she was always around. She'd drop by unannounced and make herself at home, almost like she was there to keep tabs on me. She started dropping hints that our mom was worried I was acting too independent and that I needed to be more careful with my finances. One day, my mom dropped a bombshell on me. She pulled me aside and told me Jessica was having financial trouble. Apparently, her lavish lifestyle had caught up with her, and she needed help covering her debts. My mom didn't even ask. She just expected me to co-sign a loan for Jessica. The audacity of it floored me. Here I was, saving every penny to finally get ahead, and they wanted me to risk my financial future for my sister's mistakes. When I refused, all hell broke loose. My mom accused me of being selfish and ungrateful, yelling about how family is supposed to help each other. Jessica, of course, started crying, playing the victim card, and stormed out, claiming I didn't care about family at all. The argument was intense, and I left the house that night feeling more isolated than ever. Something about the whole situation didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just the loan request, it was how quickly they both turned on me, almost like they had planned this all along. I started digging into my finances, just to be safe. That's when I found something that made my blood run cold. A small loan taken out in my name years ago, one I had no memory of ever applying for. I confronted my mom about it the next day, but instead of explaining, she went straight into gaslighting mode. She told me I must have forgotten about it and that I was being dramatic. I knew in that moment that this was bigger than just a loan. My friends were furious when I told them what happened. They urged me to get legal advice, insisting that I needed to protect myself. Reluctantly, I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer. He took one look at the loan documents and confirmed what I had feared. It was fraud. He suggested I run a full credit check immediately, just to see if there were any other surprises. When I did, my heart sank. There were multiple accounts and loans that I had never opened, stretching back nearly a decade. That's when it hit me. My mom had been using my identity for years, sabotaging my progress every time I started to get ahead. This wasn't about family or love, it was about control. I realized then that I needed to confront her one last time before I decided what to do next. And I knew it wasn't going to be pretty. Update 1. After finding the fraudulent loans in my name, I knew I had to confront my mother. I drove back to the house, determined to get answers. The house was quiet when I arrived. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling on her phone like it was just another normal day. I pulled out the stack of documents I had printed out, credit reports, loan statements, everything I had found. I spread them out in front of her. At first, she barely glanced at them. Then she leaned in, eyes narrowing as she realized what they were. I watched her expression shift, like she was trying to figure out how to play this. She picked up one of the statements, tilted her head, and handed it back to me. "You must have forgotten about these," she said. "You probably opened these accounts years ago and just don't remember." I pointed out the signatures. They weren't mine. They were in her handwriting. I showed her the dates, many of which were from when I was still in college, barely making ends meet. She waved it off, telling me I was being dramatic and paranoid. She insisted I was overreacting, that maybe I was just confused about my own finances. But I wasn't confused. I had never been more certain in my life. Right then, Jessica burst through the front door. She had her phone in her hand, and it looked like she had been texting someone nonstop. Without even pausing, she marched over, looked at the papers on the table, and rolled her eyes. "What are you doing to Mom?" she snapped. This is ridiculous. You're just jealous because I've been more successful. You always do this, making up stories to get attention. I couldn't believe it. Jessica wasn't even interested in hearing the truth. It was like she had already made up her mind. I realized then that she was in on it, or at the very least, willing to defend our mother no matter what. My mom, sensing that her initial tactic wasn't working, suddenly switched gears. Her eyes filled with tears, and she put on her best sad, regretful look. She grabbed my hand, squeezing it tightly. She said she was sorry that she only did it because she was worried about me. She claimed she had seen me struggling financially and wanted to teach me responsibility. She made it sound like she was doing me a favor, like all this was for my own good. I pulled my hand away and told her it was too late for apologies. I laid it out plainly I was going to take legal action. I had to protect my credit and my future. The look on her face when I said that, it was like I had slapped her. Her fake tears dried up instantly, replaced by a cold, angry stare. She didn't say another word, just stormed out of the room. Within an hour, my phone was blowing up. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all of them texting me, accusing me of being ungrateful and heartless. They said I was tearing the family apart, that I was cruel for even thinking about taking legal action against my own mother. It was clear they had all heard a very different version of the story, likely spun by my mother and Jessica. I tried to explain what was really happening, but no one wanted to listen. Jessica was already on social media, posting vague, emotional updates about how betrayal from family hurts the most. She painted me as the villain, a heartless daughter attacking her own mother out of greed. The comments flooded in with sympathy for her and our mom. I watched as the narrative shifted online, and it felt like I was losing control of the situation. I called my lawyer, who advised me to file a police report immediately. He said I needed to document everything, in case my mother decided to escalate things further. He warned me that this would likely blow up the family dynamic even more, but I knew it was the right move. I drove straight to the police station and filed the report. As I left, my phone buzzed with a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. She told me she had gone through something similar with her own mother, unauthorized loans, identity theft, the works. She said she believed me and encouraged me to stand my ground. It was the first bit of support I'd gotten all day, and it was enough to keep me going. I decided to block my mom and Jessica on social media and told my friends not to share any information about me with them. I needed space to figure out my next steps. That night, I was sitting in my apartment when I heard a loud banging on the door. It was my mom. She was yelling loud enough for the whole building to hear, accusing me of tearing the family apart, demanding that I drop everything. I called the police, and they arrived within minutes. They escorted her away, and I filed for a restraining order the very next day. It was the hardest decision I've ever made, but I knew it was necessary. The extended family continued to side with her, painting me as the villain. I felt isolated, but I stuck to my decision. I started therapy soon after, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The more I talked about it, the more I realized just how deep my mother's manipulation went. It wasn't just about the money. It was about control, about keeping me dependent on her. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail from my mother's lawyer. It was a cease and desist notice, demanding that I drop the charges and retract my claims. I knew then that this was only the beginning of a bigger fight, but I wasn't backing down. Update 2. The cease and desist letter from my mother's lawyer arrived 3 days after I filed the police report. It was thick, filled with legal jargon that I had to read twice, just to make sense of it. The letter accused me of defamation, demanded that I retract the police report, and included thinly veiled threats about ruining my reputation if I didn't comply. It was obvious they were trying to intimidate me into backing down. I immediately called my lawyer. He skimmed through the letter and told me not to respond directly. Instead, he advised me to gather more evidence. We needed a stronger case if we were going to deal with whatever was coming next. He suggested I request copies of all financial records tied to my social security number. I knew it was going to be a tedious process, but it was the only way to figure out the full extent of the damage. Over the next week, I pulled my credit report and contacted every bank listed. What I found made my stomach drop. There were more unauthorized loans, credit cards, and lines of credit cards, and lines of credit I had never opened. The debt stretched back nearly a decade, and the total amount was close to $100,000. It was worse than I had imagined. This wasn't just 1 or 2 loans. This was a pattern of financial abuse that had been going on for years, right under my nose. I started noticing something even more disturbing. The dates of many of the largest transactions matched up with events Jessica had bragged about in the past, like her extravagant vacation to Europe, the designer bags she showed off at family gatherings, and even her wedding expenses. It became clear that she had benefited directly from the money my mother had stolen using my identity. I tried reaching out to a few close relatives, hoping they would finally see the truth. I shared what I had found, but instead of support, I was met with disbelief and accusations. They repeated my mother's story, that I was confused, mentally unstable, and lashing out for no reason. It felt like I was banging my head against a wall. They were so deeply entrenched in her lies that nothing I said could change their minds. Then I remembered something from years ago. My mother used to keep a filing cabinet in her office labeled finances. It was always locked, and she was secretive about it, never letting anyone near it. I called my dad, he divorced my mom a few years back, and asked if he remembered the cabinet. He did, and his reaction surprised me. He said he always suspected she was up to something manipulative, but he had no idea it was this serious. He offered to help me look through it if we could get access to the house while she was out. The opportunity came sooner than expected. My mom had a scheduled out-of-town visit with a friend, so my dad and I drove to the family home together. We found the cabinet in the basement, still locked. After some struggle, we managed to pry it open. Inside was a goldmine of evidence, bank statements, loan applications, credit card records, all with my forged signature. There were even notes in Jessica's handwriting on some of the documents, like she had helped fill them out. It was undeniable now. Jessica knew. She had been complicit in the fraud, and my mother had orchestrated the entire scheme. I took photos of everything and stored the documents safely. Later that night, I confronted Jessica at her apartment. I showed her the evidence. At first, she tried to deny it, but when I pointed out her handwriting, she broke down. She admitted that she knew about the loans, but insisted that our mother had convinced her it was all for the family's benefit. She begged me not to go public, promising she would pay back the money if I just kept quiet. I told her I was done protecting her. I was going to the authorities with everything I had. She pleaded with me, sobbing, but I refused. I left her standing there, crying, as I walked out. The betrayal I felt in that moment was deeper than anything I had experienced before. I sent my mother a detailed message, outlining all the evidence I had gathered. I gave her one last chance to come clean and make things right. I set a deadline for her response. When it finally came, it was exactly what I expected. A long, manipulative text filled with guilt-tripping accusations. She claimed I was trying to ruin her life and that my dad had brainwashed me into going against her. There was no apology, no admission of guilt, just more lies. I decided I wasn't going to keep this a secret anymore. I posted the full story on Reddit, sharing screenshots of the documents with sensitive information redacted. The post blew up overnight. I woke up to hundreds of messages, all offering support. People shared similar experiences, validated my suspicions, and encouraged me to keep fighting. It was the first time I felt like I wasn't completely alone in this. The backlash against my mother was swift. People flooded her social media with comments calling her out for her actions. Jessica's accounts were hit too. She went private almost immediately. The exposure was intense, but it felt like justice. Then, just as I was starting to feel some relief, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a private investigator hired by my mother. He warned me that she was planning to sue me for defamation and emotional damages. He suggested I reconsider my actions before it was too late. It was clear this was far from over. A full-blown legal battle was coming, and I needed to be ready. Update 3. It started with a knock on my apartment door early one Saturday morning. I opened it to find not one or two, but a group of my extended family members standing there, looking stern. My aunt, uncle, 2 cousins, and even a few in-laws had all shown up unannounced. It was an ambush. I didn't even get a chance to ask what was going on before they pushed their way inside, filling up my small living room. They said it was an intervention, that I was tearing the family apart with my accusations and legal actions. My aunt, who I hadn't seen in years, took charge, insisting that I needed to drop everything, reconcile with my mother, and stop this madness. They went on about how I was destroying the family's reputation, how my mother was heartbroken and being painted unfairly as a monster. My uncle even brought up family loyalty, saying that airing our problems publicly was bringing shame on everyone. I let them talk for a while, but when it became clear they weren't going to stop, I pulled out my phone. I opened the photo gallery where I had saved copies of the documents, the forged loan applications, the fake credit cards, the credit report with all the unauthorized accounts. I held up the phone and started showing them the evidence. I didn't say much. I just let them look. There was silence as I flipped through the photos, pointing out my mother's handwriting, the dates, and the signatures she had forged. The room felt tense, like a balloon ready to pop. My aunt's face turned pale as she realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding or a family squabble. It was a crime. I told them that if they continued to side with my mother after seeing this, they were enablers. They were complicit. My cousin, who had been standing quietly in the back, suddenly stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The rest of them followed soon after, muttering angrily among themselves, refusing to admit they had been wrong. I thought that was the end of it, but as the door closed, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was my estranged uncle, the black sheep of the family. He hadn't said a word during the entire ambush. He asked if we could talk privately, so we stepped out onto the balcony. He told me he had his own history with my mother, that she had manipulated and financially abused their parents before they passed away. He had cut contact with her years ago after she convinced their father to change his will, cutting him out completely. He offered to testify in court to back up my claims about her manipulative behavior. I couldn't believe it. I had expected to face this alone, but here was someone who had experienced her deceit firsthand. With his support, I felt a surge of determination. I called my lawyer immediately after he left and told him we were ready to move forward. He filed the lawsuit that week, including charges of identity theft, fraud, and financial abuse. A few days later, Jessica showed up at my apartment. She looked a mess, her makeup was smeared, and it was obvious she had been crying. She begged me to let her in, and I did, reluctantly. She paced around the room, rambling about how everything had gotten out of control. She admitted that she had been manipulated by our mother, that she had gone along with the scheme, because she felt like she didn't have a choice. She was terrified of the legal repercussions and offered to testify against our mother if it meant saving herself. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text message from my mother. It was a long, ranting message filled with threats. She said she was going to disown me, cut me out of the family inheritance entirely if I didn't drop the case. She accused me of betraying her, of being brainwashed by my father. It was a desperate attempt to guilt-trip me, but it only strengthened my resolve. My story started getting picked up online, making its way to major forums and even a couple of news sites. The overwhelming public support was incredible. People were sharing their own experiences with toxic family members, validating everything I had been through. The more the story spread, the more people started piecing together the puzzle. Old social media posts from Jessica surfaced, showing off luxury items and vacations she couldn't have afforded on her own. The narrative began turning against my mother, and she couldn't control it. Then, in a twist I hadn't expected, I found out about a family trust fund. My lawyer uncovered documents showing that I was supposed to inherit a portion of it, but my mother had changed the will right after I moved back home. She cut me out entirely. It was clear now. She had planned this from the start. using my finances while ensuring I got nothing in the end. The media storm intensified. People dug up old photos, videos, and posts, connecting the dots between Jessica's lavish lifestyle and the fraudulent loans. It felt like the entire internet was rallying behind me, demanding justice. I filed a restraining order against my mother after she showed up at my workplace, causing a scene, screaming about how I was tearing the family apart. Jessica followed through on her promise. She gave a deposition, detailing how our mother had manipulated her, pressuring her to forge documents and lie about the loans. It was a turning point in the case. The family split into two factions, those who finally believed me and those who continued to support my mother, refusing to see the truth. My mother's desperation hit a new low. She sent me a final email, offering a settlement if I agreed to drop all charges and keep everything quiet. The amount was substantial, but it came with a non-disclosure agreement. I forwarded the email to my lawyer without responding. The court date was set. This was it. I knew that this case could either ruin me financially or finally free me from the grip of my mother's control. Update 4. The day of the court hearing arrived faster than I expected. I walked into the courthouse with a folder packed full of evidence, everything I'd gathered over the past few months. The forged loan documents, Jessica's deposition, photos from the filing cabinet, it was all there. I knew it was going to be a long day, but I felt ready. Inside the courtroom, I noticed my mother sitting at the defendant's table. She looked calm, almost smug, as if she believed she still had the upper hand. Her lawyer, a polished man in an expensive suit, kicked off the opening statements by painting her as a loving, misunderstood mother. He claimed she only made financial decisions to protect me, her irresponsible daughter who couldn't manage money. He tried to frame the entire case as a family dispute blown out of proportion by a bitter, unstable daughter seeking revenge. When it was my turn, I took the stand. I didn't hold back. I started from the beginning, explaining how I had trusted my mother, only to find out she had been using my identity for years. I described the moment I discovered the first fraudulent loan, how it felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. Then I showed the documents, the loan applications with her handwriting, the fake credit cards, and the credit report listing all the unauthorized accounts. The reaction in the courtroom was immediate. I heard gasps from people sitting behind me. Even the judge looked surprised as I laid out the evidence. I could feel the tension in the air, but I kept going, determined to get the full story out there. Then it was Jessica's turn. She looked nervous as she took the stand, avoiding eye contact with our mother. Her voice was shaky, but she confirmed everything I had said. She admitted that she had known about the fraudulent loans and had gone along with it because our mother pressured her. She broke down crying, saying she felt trapped and manipulated, that she thought she had no other choice. The courtroom was silent as she finished. My mother's lawyer jumped up, ready to discredit her. He suggested that Jessica was only testifying to save herself from legal trouble, that she was trying to shift the blame to avoid consequences. Jessica didn't deny it. She admitted she had made mistakes, but she insisted she was telling the truth now to make amends. The sincerity in her voice was hard to ignore. Then my lawyer played our trump card, the recorded phone call. It was a conversation I had with my mother shortly after I confronted her about the loans. In the recording, my mother's voice was clear and confident. She admitted to opening the accounts in my name, saying, "I did what I had to do. You wouldn't have made it without my help." The recording echoed through the courtroom. I watched as my mother's face turned red. She jumped up from her seat, yelling that it was all lies, that I had manipulated the recording. The judge had to reprimand her for the outburst, telling her to sit down and control herself. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Next, my estranged uncle took the stand. He was calm and collected as he shared stories about our mother's history of financial manipulation. He talked about how she had convinced their father to change his will, cutting him out completely. He described how she had manipulated and controlled people to get what she wanted. His testimony provided the missing context, showing that this wasn't a one-time mistake, it was a pattern of behavior. Then came the bombshell. My lawyer presented the altered will. The document showed that I was originally entitled to a significant portion of the family trust fund. The changes were made shortly after I moved back home, around the same time the unauthorized loans were taken out. It was obvious now that this had been her plan all along, to use my finances while cutting me out entirely. The judge's expression shifted as he listened. He asked my mother's lawyer for an explanation, but the lawyer stammered, unable to give a satisfactory answer. It was clear they hadn't expected this evidence. During a recess, my mother cornered me in the hallway. Her face was pale, and her voice was low as she pleaded with me to settle. She offered to pay me off quietly, to end this nonsense before it got worse. I told her it wasn't about the money anymore, it was about justice. I turned and walked back into the courtroom, leaving her standing there, looking desperate for the first time. The news of the courtroom drama spread quickly. Family members who had previously sided with my mother started messaging me, expressing shock and disbelief. Some apologized, admitting they hadn't believed me before. Others continued to blame me for airing dirty laundry and making the family look bad. Finally, after several tense hours of deliberation, the judge returned with the verdict. He ruled in my favor, finding that my mother had committed identity theft and financial abuse. She was ordered to repay all the fraudulent debts and to restore my original share of the trust fund. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. As the verdict was read, my mother had a public meltdown right there in the courtroom. She screamed at me, calling me an ungrateful child and accusing me of ruining her life. Security had to escort her out as she continued her tirade. It was a scene straight out of a soap opera. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I was finally free from her control, but I knew this victory came at a price. I had lost most of my family, and they might never understand what I went through. Just as I was getting into my car, my phone buzzed with a notification. Jessica had posted a public apology on social media. She acknowledged her role in the deception, thanked me for standing up to our mother, and promised to do better. The post was going viral, and I knew this was only the beginning of the fallout. Update 5. After the court case, I expected things to quiet down, but Jessica's public apology changed everything. Her post went viral almost instantly. She wrote a long message admitting her complicity, detailing how our mother had manipulated her, and explaining that she had gone along with it because she felt trapped. She described how our mother took advantage of both of us for years, controlling our finances and pitting us against each other. Thousands of people commented, sharing their own stories of family betrayal and manipulation. It was surreal to watch, but the support pouring in was overwhelming. The backlash against my mother was swift and brutal. Her social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. People called her out for her actions, demanding answers and accusing her of being a fraud. Within days, she deactivated all her accounts. The family business she was involved in took a major hit too. Clients started pulling out, unwilling to be associated with the negative publicity. I heard through the grapevine that her business partner was considering legal action as well, accusing her of mismanagement. The family was split. Some members continued to side with my mother, insisting that she had only been trying to help. They clung to the narrative that she was a caring mother who made a few bad choices. But others reached out to me privately, apologizing for not believing me sooner. It was a strange feeling, to be vindicated but also to realize just how fractured the family had become. I knew things would never go back to the way they were before. Jessica reached out and asked to meet in person. I agreed, but I was cautious. We met at a quiet cafe, and she looked different, tired but also relieved, like a weight had been lifted. She apologized, this time in person, and it felt more genuine than her online post. She said she had started therapy, trying to unravel the years of manipulation and control she had been under. She admitted she didn't expect me to forgive her right away but wanted a chance to repair our relationship. I listened, and while I didn't make any promises, I told her I appreciated her honesty. It was a start, but trust was something that would take time. I continued my own therapy, diving deeper into the patterns of emotional abuse I had endured growing up. The more I unpacked, the more I realized just how much control my mother had exerted over my life. Therapy helped me understand that it wasn't my fault for not seeing it sooner. It was a slow process, but I started to forgive myself. A few weeks later, I received another letter from my mother's lawyer. This time, it was a settlement offer. It included a large sum of money, but it came with strings attached, a non-disclosure agreement (NDA). The NDA would prevent me from ever speaking publicly about the case or the family issues again. I thought about it for a few days but ultimately decided to reject it. No amount of money was worth my silence. I forwarded the letter to my lawyer and moved on. I wrote a message to the family group chat, laying everything out clearly. I explained why I took legal action and detailed the evidence I had found. I didn't ask for their forgiveness or try to change their minds. I just wanted them to know the truth. I ended the message by saying that while I was sad to lose them, I had to protect myself. The responses were mixed. Some sent messages of support, while others accused me of tearing the family apart. I didn't reply. I knew I had said all I needed to say. Around this time, a major news outlet picked up my story. It was framed as an example of standing up to family financial abuse, and the response was incredible. I received an outpouring of messages from people who had gone through similar experiences. It felt validating to know I wasn't alone. It gave me a sense of closure I didn't realize I needed. My father also reached out. We hadn't spoken much in recent years, but he called me out of the blue. He apologized for not seeing the signs earlier, for not stepping in when he should have. We had a long, emotional conversation, and for the first time, it felt like we were on the same page. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a good first step. Jessica's public apology tour continued. She did interviews, sharing her side of the story and talking about the manipulation we both experienced. I watched some of them from a distance. It was hard to see her so vulnerable, but it also made me feel a sense of relief. She was taking responsibility, and that was more than I ever expected. Jessica and I decided it was time for a fresh start. We found a small, cozy apartment in a new city, far away from the drama. Moving day was bittersweet, but as we unpacked the last of our things, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. Then, just as we were finishing up, I received a package in the mail from my estranged aunt. Inside was a letter and a small, tarnished locket, a family heirloom that my grandparents had intended for me. The letter explained that my mother had hidden it away, but my aunt felt I deserved to have it. I held the locket in my hand, feeling a wave of unexpected gratitude. I made one final post on Reddit, updating everyone who had followed my story. I thanked them for their support, shared my plans for the future, and told them about the move. The response was overwhelming, with people cheering me on, saying how proud they were that I stood up for myself. It was the perfect ending to this chapter of my life. As I sat in our new living room, sunlight streaming through the windows, I looked around at our new home. I could hear Jessica laughing in the kitchen, and for the first time in years, I felt free. I knew I was ready for this new chapter. I ended my Reddit post with a simple message: sometimes the family you build is better than the one you're born into.